to the love of my life, Sophie, 27. Next month, we were supposed to be married, and everything appeared ideal. That illusion came apart today when I learned she had been sexting her ex. We had been together for more than 4 years, and it was last summer when Sophie first mentioned marriage. The time seemed unreal and horribly painful, not because I didn't want to be with her, but rather because I hadn't given marriage any thought. I was shocked. Still, I loved her sincerely and felt that was the logical next step. So this year we decided to have a spring wedding. I got her a ring at the beginning of the year to officially mark it, and on Valentine's Day she gave me one. Until today, everything seemed perfect. Sophie left on a 2-day work trip this morning. Since I work from home, I was at our shared house when it all fell apart. She utilized our shared PC frequently as her bank position prevented her from accessing personal emails on her work laptop. Usually, hardly touching the PC, I worked on my own laptop or tablet. My laptop failed today, so I worked on the shared PC. As I worked, I discovered her email account remained open in a minimized tab. At first, I gave it little thought until an email alert showed up. I looked at the name Lucas. Lucas, her former college mate, the one she claimed to have broken up with since he had returned to his native country. I knew about him. She had brought him up during our first days of dating as we shared tales about former relationships. She told me back then that their breakup had been friendly and that they hadn't spoken lately. I listened to her without doubt. Why not me? But today curiosity won me over. Clicking on the email, what I discovered made my heart stop. It was a continual series of signals spanning months. I went quickly through, enlarging eyes with every line. She had written about missing him, dreamed about their time together, and how her thought of him made her feel. In disbelief, I read more of her responses than his. It was explicit, meticulous, and like a strike to the gut. She admitted to touching herself thinking about him, having detailed graphic fantasies, and even bemoaned the fact she was marrying me while longing for what she had with him. The most terrible component is using harsh words I never would have seen from her. She wrote about how much she missed him. The worst was a recent note asking, "Why am I even marrying him when he doesn't pleasure me like you did?" I sat there staring at the TV, bile rising in my throat, feeling as though a dagger direct to my heart. Our private times had been lovely. She even said she found me fulfilling, but today everything felt like a lie. The betrayal, the pure dishonesty, flowed through me like fire. I sat in the chair staring at the computer, unable to move. An emotional tsunami swept over me. Anger, incredulity, grief. The room seemed smaller, the walls pressing in to keep me in this stifling reality. As I went over the messages, attempting to persuade myself this was not real, my hands shook. But every word Sophie spoke, every nasty detail, burnt itself in my head. Unquestionably, I pushed away from the desk, my chest heaving like I would have after running a marathon. The betrayal seemed too great to fit, too sharp to overlook. The woman I was meant to wed, the one I had dreamed of a future with, had been slipping behind my back and dreaming of another guy. Not any man, Lucas, her ex. She had always talked about this one so casually, as though he were only a chapter from her past, long closed. Still, it was never closed. The inquiries arrived one after another. For what length of time has this been continuing? Was she really going to carry out the wedding while thinking this way? When she was forwarding these kinds of communications, how could she look me in the eyes and say she loved me? My stomach started to turn over. I staggered to the bathroom, dabbed cold water on my face, and sought to quiet the storm building inside me. It hardly made difference. I returned to the living room and slumped on the couch, mindlessly staring at the wall. Though she was miles away, my imagination ran with the prospect of facing her. The thought of waiting till she came back was intolerable. My own fury bubbled to surface. Part of me wanted to phone her, demand answers, rage, scream, anything to stop this agony. But I stopped myself. I checked my phone and had to consider this even if every thread of my existence wanted to erupt. A few texts from Sophie, informal reports on her trip. "Just landed, love you. The arrogance of work's busier than I thought, but I can't wait to come home to you." I choked it down even as I felt the bile surge once more. I said nothing. I decided instead, rather than could. There was no wedding taking place. Someone who could turn on me like this is not someone I would be marrying. I had to act fast, deliberately, and without allowing my feelings to push me into a careless mess. I first phoned my manager, said there was a personal situation, and asked to have some time off. He agreed without specific information requests. Though I could hear the worry in his voice, I lacked the vitality to convince him I was fine. Not next. I concentrated on making sure the house was secure. Sophie was mistaken to believe she could dance back after this. I changed the locks and gathered her belongings without thinking twice into boxes. Our joint lives, cut to a few cardboard boxes. Looking at the pictures of us on the mantel, her joyful face, arms encircling me, I felt only hatred and betrayal. I flipped them face down and left the receipt attached to the front door after sending her items to a storage facility. When she returned to a vacant, locked house, she would know where to look for them. Though at that moment, harshness was all I could manage. That resolved me. I was not going to be the fool anymore. I then focused on our wedding plans. I canceled what I could and made arrangements for reimbursements for the venue, the caterer, and the photographer. I didn't care, even though some were partial. Compared to what I felt I had lost emotionally, the cash loss was little. Our months of preparation for the wedding were destroyed in one afternoon. Every call and every email served as another reminder of the life I believed I was creating, suddenly collapsing around me. I spent the remainder of the day in a fog, repeatedly going back over everything. Recollections of Sophie flooded back, tarnished now by her treachery. Her drowsy smile in the morning, her laughter at my jokes, her finger brushing over my hair as we curled on the couch, all of which would tell you something about her. I would have valued those times. They seemed hollow and twisted now. By nightfall, tiredness knocked me down. I hadn't moved from the chair in hours, nor had eaten. Once more, buzzing on my phone was another text from Sophie. "Miss you already." I stared numbly, eager to be back and in your arms. She could find the lies really quickly. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a heaviness in my chest that I couldn't get rid of. It felt as though I knew her hardly at all. I slept little. My mind wouldn't let me relax. As soon as I opened my eyes, I felt once more the truth of everything. I had to make sure everything was ready before Sophie came back, since her treachery felt like an open wound not stopping bleeding. I felt practically sick thinking of her walking through that door with her normal smile, expecting a friendly welcome. I arranged to stay at a motel for a while, packed the rest of my stuff, the ones I wanted to keep, and, though not fancy, it would have worked till I decided what to do next. Being in the same place where I had discovered everything made my skin crawl. Texts from Sophie buzzed on my phone all day. They were first normal, then curious, and finally began to sound concerned. "Hey, haven't heard from you. Everything's good? You are not picking up my calls. Anything happened?" Ignoring them all, I felt a horrible sort of gratification at her uncertainty. Let her ponder. By evening, I felt both physically and emotionally exhausted. I had to clear my thoughts, so I drove. The roads blurted as I drove down known paths without a definite end. Though the radio was softly playing in the background, I didn't understand the song. All it was noise. As the sun sank below the horizon, throwing long shadows on the road, I parked at a peaceful overlook I used to visit when I needed to think. My mind repeated bits of her messages over and over again like a broken record. The city lights twinkled below, a reminder that even if mine felt as though it had stopped, life kept changing. Lost, I sat there gazing out at the vast metropolis. How did things all go so wrong? How could I have overlooked it? After hours, I drove back to the motel at last. I checked the latch on my door again and slipped into the stiff, strange bed. Though it was not home, it was safer than being surrounded by thoughts of Sophie. That evening, I tried to drive the ideas away, even momentarily, by forcing myself to eat something. A depressing sandwich from a vending machine. Sleep came finally, heavy and restless. Sophie's texts grew more intense the following day. "I am beginning to get concerned. Tell me you're good later." Then, "I lost all my contacts and photos for some reason. Has something happened to our computer?" Her worry would have been touching if I knew nothing at all. By mid-afternoon, she contacted my mother. I felt a chilly anger boiling inside me, the type that made me sharp and alert. Worry evident in her voice, my mother called me right away. "What's going on, sweetie?" Concerned, "Sophie claims she cannot reach you. Are you all right?" I inhaled deeply and explained to her the essentials. I needed space. The wedding was off. Sophie had been disloyal. Although my mother refrained from demanding additional specifics, her voice sounded to be unhappy. She understood, and for now, that was sufficient. I advised her not to say anything to Sophie. Just keep her in the dark a little longer. She agreed grudgingly, believing I would cover everything in due course. Knowing that my family was behind me even without knowing the whole story, I hung up and felt the tiniest bit lighter. When Sophie eventually got home following her work trip, she was greeted with locked doors and a receipt for her belongings taped to the front. She left voicemail after furiously phoning me. The messages began with uncertainty, then became worried, and lastly they became angry. "Where do you find yourself? Why had you locked me out? Something is happening." Stone dash faced comma, I paid attention to them. Her guilt and panic in her voice had no effect on me the way she most likely felt. She must have called half of our friends as well, since by that evening I was receiving texts from people asking if I was okay and what was happening. She was doing the right thing. None of them got my reply. By the second day, Sophie's desperation peaked, and this was my battle to fight. I wasn't ready to share yet. She had left voicemails varying in intensity, from demands for explanations to sobbing apologies. "I sense something is amiss here. Would we be able to chat kindly? Whatever it is, we can sort through it." Then, a few hours later, "I need you to answer me. I'm not sure what's going on. This is harsh." Her message's emotional whiplash did not knock me. I felt frigid, disconnected, as though I were observing all this happen to another person. I knew she would come up at the house finally, so I had to be ready for that. I stayed on alert, checking my phone every time it buzzed because the expectation bit me. When she eventually showed up, it was almost a relief. I missed her reaction, but I could picture the shock and uncertainty when she discovered the locks had been changed and her key worthless. Her voicemail at that point was hysterical. "Why is the house under lock? My key doesn't seem to work. Have you locked the doors? Are you at home?" After a while, she must have seen the receipt pinned to the door. I imagined her pacing on the porch, her fury bubbling over as she realized I wouldn't be answering. The following corresponded more with panic. "You delivered my items to storage? Why would you want to do that? This goes nuts. We must chat." I said nothing, my jaw clenched. I heard from my mother once more that evening. It felt as though I was waiting for her to put the pieces together, to grasp what I had found. "Sophie gave me a call, honey. She is asking a lot of questions and is very concerned. As you advised, I told her nothing, but I'm worried. Are you certain you want no conversation with her?" Though only half true, I convinced her that I was fine. I told her I wanted more time before I confronted Sophie, and my mother, always supportive, valued my choice. Late that night, Sophie's message tone changed. The pleas stopped and were replaced by something harsher, more angry. "This is absurd. Congratulations if you are trying to make me feel awful or fear me. You pass. Whether you like it or not, though, we will discuss this." Her arrogance was almost ridiculous. Sitting at the motel desk, staring at the printouts of the emails I had saved as proof, just in case I ever needed them, she still had no idea that I had read every nasty word she had sent to Lucas. Though I wanted not to look at them once again, knowing they were there gave me an unusual sensation of control. It was like a reassurance that I was not dreaming things, and that I had every right to feel what I was experiencing. Sophie moved the next morning. One of my buddies texted me, "Hey man, Sophie has been hunting for you. She asked whether I knew where you were. Is everything in order?" Though it caused my pulse to quicken, I dismissed it. Desperate, she was reaching out to everyone she could remember. She showed up somewhere I didn't want her to be not too long ago. I had expected her to show up to my office, so I had already phoned ahead and instructed my manager to treat any uninvited guests by declaring I was on leave. She had arrived up, looking unhappy, and left a letter at reception when I checked in later. I hardly wanted to know what it said. The idea of her arriving, creating a spectacle, set off another surge of wrath. Her pattern was that she would beg, then blame, then return to portraying the victim. I could see her movements before she did by now. Still, that made handling it no simpler. I too was suffering emotionally from this. Though emotionally damaged and tired, I was holding on, and the books from Sophie kept arriving. They swung back and forth in an unrelenting cycle from enraged to contrite. Please, I am begging you. We can correct it, whatever it is. Though I have no idea what I did, I love you. You're a coward. Then, you're not doing this. This is your handling of things? Running away and hiding will help Dot? After 2 days of this, the tempest outside started to calm. It was almost funny, seeing her try to turn the circumstances to make me look like the one in the wrong. The messages slowed down. Her calls started to fade. She might be beginning to realize that this was not something one could go back from. Deep down, though, I knew she would not give up that readily. People like Sophie did not just walk away when events did not go as planned. I wasn't sure how long I could keep this up, but I knew I had to keep pushing until she responded, or tired every alternative. Not after what she had done, I couldn't allow her back in. Under a pile of treachery and resentment, the love I once had for her was buried. This was not a return from which one could come back. The third day following Sophie's return was the quiet before the storm. Tired and restless, I was lodging in a motel. Though should have been a relief, the continual pings from my phone had reduced to silence, felt like a trap being set. My head was clear with expectation for her next action. I was correct to be wary. Early evening, I received a text from James, a friend, saying, "Dude, I think I spotted Sophie downtown. She was asking around for you and seemed annoyed. Watch carefully." My heart flew. Knowing she was out there actively looking for me made me shudder, even though I had planned for this. I walked to the tiny motel room, attempting to relax. Nothing else I could do except wait it out and hope she wouldn't discover me. But an hour later, the natural occurred. Sitting near the window, I was peering out at the darker sky when I noticed a familiar man strolling up the gravel road toward the door. My stomach dropped. It was Sophie. She looked desperate, her hair a tangle, and her eyes bright. I observed her gesturally frantically as she spoke to the receptionist. In my chest, thumping was my heart. Sophie's eyes followed the receptionist's head motions toward the rooms. She saw me through the window before I could turn away. I got up slowly and inhaled deeply. Our eyes caught for a single second, then she was at my door, hammering on it like she was trying to break it down. I wasn't about to hide. Nowhere was to run. I opened the door just enough to cover her from charging in the gap. Her face reddened, and she glanced at me with a mixture of relief and resentment. "Why?" she begged, her voice faltering. "Why are you treating me this way? That occurred, Sam?" "You know why, Sophie," I said, my voice low and calm, staring at her, the person I had loved for years, suddenly a stranger in front of me. Her eyes fluttered with uncertainty, then narrowed. "I have no idea what you mean. You basically changed the locks, ghosted me, sent my belongings to storage, and blocked me everywhere. You owe me a clarifying statement, Dot." Her comments almost made me laugh, but it turned out as a sour sneers instead. "I owe you nothing," I answered, teeth clenched. "But you have been lying to me for months, and this much is clear-cut. I found out everything. You have been cheating on me, emotionally if not physically." Her face turned pale and she backed off as though I had hit her. "Cheating," she started, but I cut her off. "Don't lie to me, Sophie," Sam said. "I went over your emails, all of them." The horror in her eyes indicated she understood exactly what I meant. She stood there motionless for a while. Then the tears fell fast and hard. "It wasn't real," she said, reaching for my arm, but I moved back out of her path. "I swear, it was simply dumb messages. I never was going to follow through on them. It was only, I don't know, a way to feel something different." The anger I had been holding back erupted. A way to feel something different? "Sophie, we had a wedding to arrange. You were lost in dreams of someone else as we were creating a life together. How do you suppose that would affect my mood?" She slumped, sliding down the doorframe, her face buried in her hands as my voice shook and the pain and rage spilled out all at once. "I apologize. I am really sorry. I never intended to hurt you. It was dumb. It was a mistake. Please allow us to discuss this. I promise to repair it." But I was done. Her appearance and the sound of her begging just confirmed what I already knew. No love powerful enough to heal this treachery, no trust remained. I inhaled deeply and let the reality of my choice to settle in. No, Sophie. We are not able to correct this. You chose. Now I am choosing as well. The wedding is off. We are finished, she shouted, a sound so raw it made my chest tighten. I stepped back and started to close the door, hoping you would find whatever it was you were seeking for. Not with me. Please, Sam, avoid doing this. I want you. This is something we can correct. But I turned, not looking back. Closing the door, I locked it behind me and leaned against it while her sobbing rang down the hall. From my chest, I felt the weight drop to a chilly, empty emptiness. That was over. I was free, even though the life I knew was gone. I felt as though I could breathe once more.